Hi, so I am going to be talking about my findings and my answers to discussion for the three different questions you asked for this assignment. And so I will be talking about what I found in each of them. So if I'm looking at my computer, I'm looking at my notes. But first I'm going to start with the first question, and that was, what does nuclear non-proliferation mean, and explore the history of the United Nations with those policies. And so I actually found a lot of information on this. I think I definitely wrote the most on this question because it was like there's a lot of information and there was a lot to answer, and I found a lot of it interesting. So according to the video put out by the United Nations, where the Secretary General spoke, he talked about the treaty and really just getting to the point of limiting the number of nuclear weapons. He was really just kind of stating the UN's position on that and how all of that history goes way back, but he was really just reinstating that message. He didn't give a lot of information, just statistics and things like that, and I think he just wanted to kind of reinforce what the UN's been working on for years. And so then that's when I really started looking into the history of it. And in the article International Day for the Total Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, published by the UN, you get literally a list from 1945 to 2025, and that is really awesome. And I'm really glad that you gave us that document, because that explained a lot to me. And I started from reading how in 1945 and 1946 the General Assembly first started with their mandate to reduce nuclear weapons or any weapons of mass destruction, and that's right after World War II, especially what happened when we bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So that was definitely the start of everything there. And it was really interesting how the UN never really, from 1945 to now, hasn't really changed their mind on how they feel about the proliferation treaty and all of that. They really are very we don't want mass weapons. We don't want any of the nuclear weapons to threaten our world, because it's awful and we've seen what it can do to people, and they know that. And they also talk about in the post-Cold War era, where the Cold War was this mass production of nuclear weapons because we were in such a race with the Soviet Union to see who could produce the most and who could do the most, honestly. So that was a step in the wrong direction, and the UN, even though that was going on, they were definitely still pushing towards no nuclear weapons or just limiting them, but the Cold War definitely set them back. And then after the Cold War, there's a lot of conversation about how if there's mutual trust between the two countries, or just all the countries in this world, that it can be easily kind of taken away. Not taken away, but just we have less of a problem with threats and just things like that, because there's trust between the two, that countries and other countries in this world, that's not going to happen. And then they're still really committed, but there is a plethora, and they had an exact number. I don't have that right now, but they had an exact number of how many nuclear weapons are still in this world, but they're still trying to get especially the United States. I read that the United States won't sign the treaties, and it makes sense because we don't want to, take back all that progress, and what if something happened. But I don't know, I think sometimes if the United States would participate in that treaty, it might help other countries feel a lot safer around us, especially countries like Russia, China, North Korea, just countries that we constantly have problems with. So that's what kind of my take on that. And I also wrote about how they're still working to this day, how in February 2026, they tried to get that an agreement between Russia and the United States to cut down their nuclear weapons, not take them away, but at least cut them down. And it sound like when I read that it didn't really work, but it seems like they're trying to keep this going. And then the second question we were asked to answer was, what did you learn about the U.S. government's nuclear policies during the Cold War? I learned that what I kind of said earlier, that the U.S. was very pro making nuclear weapons. We had just like discovered that we could do that during World War II, and then like Cold War was pretty quick after. We discovered all that, and we wanted to keep that going, and the Soviet Union was trying to develop bombs at the same time, and we were just in a big race with them to keep this going. And I think that just kept the US, let's keep going, and they were constantly in a race. Even the moon race, like we were just constantly in a race with the Soviet Union. So I read that they partnered with many allies, especially like South Korea, to deploy nuclear weapons there, because South Korea is an area where, you know, North Korea, China, Russia, they're all kind of near, and they were helping defend South Korea. And that's kind of the reason why we still have a good relationship with South Korea, because we keep in contact with them. So yeah, I just kind of also talked about, that's the example of how they felt during the Cold War, and they just kept increasing their supply. And I think after the Cold War, the United States was like, we have to kind of step back and realize that this is going to cause a problem to mass produce them. I also answered about the 2 videos about the Navajo Nation and the islands, Bikini Atoll. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And I just think it was awful that the United States really just let such a mistake happen and let all that slipped up, because radioactive chemicals is no joke, and that can easily kill someone. So I think it's awful. And then we were asked to talk about what the Security Council is and what the UN General Assembly is, and I did Model United Nations when I was in high school. So I kind of explained that the Security Council is a 15-member council with 5 permanent members and 10 that rotate in and out throughout the years. And the UN General Assembly is like the main organ powerhouse of the United Nations. It's just, when you think of United Nations and everyone meeting, that's what you kind of think of, the General Assembly. And so the main difference kind of between them, like structurally, is the Security Council's 15 members, 5 permanent, 10 rotate, and the UN General Assembly's everyone. Everyone who is in the United Nations. And so then you asked us to kind of talk about their specific takes on the nuclear weapons. And I talked about how the Security Council is definitely promoting this disarmament of nuclear weapons. Same with the General Assembly. Like, that's where a lot of the stuff's been coming from, with continuing to want to stop the mass production of nuclear weapons. The Security Council, although because the United States is one of their permanent members, I think it definitely, and Russia and the United States are 2 of the Security Council's permanent members. I think that that's kind of hard for them to really take a definite stance on that, and the urgency of making decisions regarding the topic, because the United States doesn't want to cut their nuclear weapons, nor does Russia. So that's what's kind of hard, I think, for the Security Council there. And then the General Assembly is just promoting it, wanting to disarmament of the nuclear weapons, wanting to get them away and keep our world safe. But yeah, that's what I talked about, and that's my answers to the question. So